Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. And anyone who knows this channel knows that Blood, Sweat, and Tears are one of my very, very favorite bands. And their first album, Child is Father to the Man, was excellent. It had all of the great elements that made for a wonderful Blood, Sweat, and Tears album. It had the brass section, the woodwinds, the guitar, all great soloists, the wonderful compositions, wonderful playing, the great drumming of Bobby Colomby, but it was missing one important factor. It was missing a compelling and dynamic lead singer because while Al Cooper is incredibly talented as a writer, as a producer, as a man who discovered a lot of great talent, as a keyboard player, his singing is an acquired taste. The band needed rock'em sock'em lead singer. And for their second album, they found that man. And he's one of the finest vocalists of all time across any genre. I'm, of course, talking about the great David Clayton-Thomas, whose early life was anything but stable. He was born in England and then moved to Canada with his family, where he grew up, had a terrible relationship with his father, abuse, and all the rest of it, if I remember correctly, spent time in the equivalent of a sort of juvenile prison and decided early on that music was his road to, freedom and peace. And he sung and sung and sung till he went to New York, accompanied with John Lee Hooker, singing with him. And so he met a legend of music relatively early on in his life. And it was Jody Collins who introduced him to Bobby Colomby, the drummer of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, because he was looking to put together the same band, but with a real lead singer. And the Blood, Sweat, and Tears second album, the self-titled, became one of the biggest albums of all time. And it became this because it crossed over every single demographic, racial demographics, national demographics, young people, old people, people who like jazz, people who like rock, people who hate jazz, people who hate rock, people who just listen to pop music, people who loathe pop music. All of them bought and listened to that Blood, Sweat, and Tears album. It was one of those albums that everybody had and everybody loved. It was it was experimental enough and modern sounding enough to be countercultural, but it was rooted in some of the jazz and even big band traditions of modern American music that older folks could get behind it. The lyrics weren't really political, they were just, great songs. And people absolutely loved the band. But the Troubles didn't stop following David Clayton Thomas, even though he got very famous and much beloved because the government at the time, the U.S. government, got wind of the fact that in Canada he had a criminal record, and they were going to make it very hard for him to renew his visa to perform with the band and record in the U.S. because everyone else in the band was from the U.S. and they were a U.S. based band, and so a deal was made whereby the band would play the Eastern Bloc countries, the communist countries of Europe, in exchange for the US government helping them out with the visa. Mafioso stuff, you do us a favor. But as the line from Lawrence of Arabia says, there's honor among thieves, but none among politicians. And the band sort of found that out, that didn't make their troubles go away. It only made the critics really go on the attack. And I think they kind of always wanted to, because if there's one thing that a lot of critics hate, it's success and talent. And Blood, Sweat, and Tears and David Clayton-Thomas had plenty of both. And so the band was under attack, both from left wing and right wing journalists, but they pursued on and did some wonderful, wonderful albums. The third and fourth album, just Blood, Sweat, and Tears 3 and 4, absolutely wonderful. Clayton Thomas left for a few albums, but then came back. All of the stuff he ever did for the band was absolutely rock solid. And since around the early 80s, he's had a very prolific solo career. He's toured the world several times over, released many solo albums of his own, and he really just has a voice that is so perfect. It is powerful, it is deep, it is dynamic, it is distinct. It's just one of the most pleasant voices to listen to. And in an interview on the Adam Carolla show from, I think, either earlier this year, well, must have been earlier this year, drummer Bobby Colomby said that one of the reasons that he thinks that David's voice was so attractive to people is that it cut through AM radio so well. But I'll say that it was equally wonderful, and you could hear it in its full dynamic range glory on a hi-fi setup. And of course, the Blood, Sweat, and Tears, almost the whole catalog, at least the most popular albums, have gotten the audiophile treatment more than almost any other albums. Mobile Fidelity has done several versions of several of the albums. So has Acoustic Sounds. So has Audio Fidelity. I believe DCC, a sister company of theirs, has too. So whether you're listening on an AM radio where that voice just cuts through the static, if you will, or whether you're listening to it on an audiophile edition, that voice is pure magic. So on this day, I'll say happy birthday to David Clayton-Thomas, truly one of the finest vocalists of all time. Like, subscribe. We will see you next time. Take care.